Hey, it's a great day to be great, and it's a great day to continue to build the legacy and to continue to build the platform that I call leadership. Welcome to this episode of the Infinite Impact Leadership Podcast. I am the host, Dr. Daryl Crosby, and I am honored and I am humbled that you have chosen to spend the next few moments of your life with me. And in this episode, we are checking for understanding with the one and only attorney Brian J. Smalls as he shares with us some key leadership principles, what 2020 taught him, and the lessons he's taken into 2021. Let's go. All right, everybody. What's good? What's good? Welcome to the Infinite Impact Leadership Podcast. And before we get started, I want to tell this quick story, man, because my guest today, man, this dude was almost the reason why my wife and I never got married. Ooh, fun fact. Fun fact. Let's get into it. We're talking about the late 90s, right? Talk about the late 90s, and all y'all millions of viewers, I know y'all already know, but I went to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. And that's where I met my wife, at Hampton University, Hampton, Virginia. But back in the late 90s, like I said, technology was different. So there were quite a few times where my girlfriend at the time, she would not text me, but she would page me, right? Just to talk, just to have conversation. And so back then, it wasn't instantaneous. So when you get a page, you got to look for somewhere to call back. It's not on your phone where you could just do and call it back. You got to find somewhere. So that might have meant spending some money going to a payphone or going back to the house if you're out and about or going over somebody else's house. But the point is, she would page me, and then a lot of times this happened more than once. I would get the opportunity to call back, but when I called back, I could never get with her, right? I could never talk to her. And so when I finally got a chance to talk to her, after a couple of times, I'm like, yo, I called back. What happened? And she was like, my roommate was on the phone. And I'm like, a roommate on the phone, man. I want to talk to my girl. She gonna have to be all right. And so, that happened several times. And then it got to the point where I'm questioning, like, who's your roommate talking to, man? And she would say something like talking to some dude in Michigan. Say some dude in Michigan, old scrub dude, man. I'm trying to talk to my lady. So I'm big on communication. My wife will tell you we're big on communication as a couple. That's key in leadership. That's key. All right. But what's not key in leadership is selfishness. So I was being selfish in this whole process because when I call my lady, I want to talk to my lady. We might have had nothing to talk about. So time happened. So I got to the point. I'm like, yo, who is this bum? Like, who is this dude that's keeping us from communicating? So, long story short, even to this day, fast forward, my wife and her roommate then, to this day, are still best friends, right? And my wife's roommate at the time, Sonia, her husband is the guest of our show right now, Mr. Brian Smalls. So it's crazy how we went through all of that. At one point, I didn't know the guy, but I couldn't stand him because he was keeping me away from from my lady. But even to this point, years later, man, we are some of the best friends that we can have, man. We love their family, and I'm honored here at the Infinite Impact Leadership Podcast to have with us Mr. Brian Smalls. Let me tell you why he was in Michigan. First of all, you got to understand because he's from Williamsburg. So those of y'all who are familiar with Hampton and Hampton University in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, you know that Williamsburg is about 30 minutes away. It's not far. But he's a graduate of Lafayette High School, the infamous Lafayette High School. He was in Michigan because after he graduated from Lafayette in 1999, he went on and matriculated into the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. So while he was in Michigan, he was a member of the University of Michigan football team. That's right, winning a Big Ten championship and playing alongside the likes of who people call the GOAT, Mr. Tom Brady. He was right there on the football field with him. So Brian went on to win some prestigious awards for example, at the University of Michigan, the Athletic Academic Achievement Award. After graduating from Michigan with distinction in 2003, he enrolled in the School of Law at the University of Miami, Florida. During his tenure there, he was selected to the Society of Bar and Gavel, the school's top honor society. Then after he graduated law school in 2006, he came back to Virginia. He wanted to give back to the state that brought him up, and he started his esteemed legal career. He started out in Newport News, Virginia, as a prosecutor. He served as an assistant Commonwealth attorney. He's argued before the Supreme Court of Virginia, which is the highest court in the Commonwealth. Then he turned into an entrepreneur. You know, he wanted to continue to expand. He wanted to continue to grow. So he started his own law firm, Cornerstone Estate Planners. And we're going to get a little more into his experience as an entrepreneur. And even with that, he's been the acting Commonwealth attorney for Surrey County. He is the former president of the York, James City, Williamsburg branch of the NAACP. And he has also started he's a co-founder of Media Mentors, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that teaches media arts and entrepreneurial skills to youth throughout the 757. So, Infinite Impact Leadership fans, supporters, everybody, let's give it up for the man, attorney Brian J. Smalls. What's good, brother?
Hey, what's going on, D? So I just want to let you know the feeling was definitely mutual regarding the phone usage, because as you stated, back in the late 90s, and really it was the early 2000s, because that's really 2000 was when my wife and I started talking.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
we had gone to high school together, but you know, she was a year ahead of me, went to Hampton. I went off to Michigan the following year, and that Thanksgiving we connected. And then after the Christmas break, we started talking.
Yeah.
And that's when the phone usage started.
Yeah.
And
man.
so if you remember back in the day, you know, I didn't have a cell phone then. And if you did have a cell phone, you couldn't talk before 9 p.m.
That's right. And check those minutes.
Right. Check those minutes.
Right.
You know, from like 9 to 7 or something like that. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah.
But so I had to get the phone cards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So so I'd go down to the little corner store, pick up you know, a few phone cards, you know, I think there was like 200 minutes on the phone card. So I was going through those like that, you know. But you know, I would call and the phone would be busy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what's going on? You know, so when I finally got through to Sonya, now at the time, Sonya and I, we weren't, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend, you know, I was trying to get there.
Right.
Almost didn't, you know,
Shooting
as a result of, you know, the phone being occupied. But God had other plans.
That's right. You better believe.
You know, no Daryl formed against me shall prosper. So
that's good.
You know, but no, you know, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, okay, is this dude go to school somewhere else? And then I found out he was on campus. I was like, why you just hop in the car or just walk across campus to go see his girl? I'm in Michigan.
Yeah.
You know, so me personally, I felt like, you know, I should have been getting, you know, getting precedent over you in this particular situation and been able to use the phone a little bit more frequently. But, you know, the reality is we both prevailed.
Yeah.
And we both won the girls.
Yeah.
And yes, to this day, they are very good friends. And
yes.
As a result, we have become very good friends.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate the kind words and just the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Yeah,
you know, took you a little while to get me on here, but that's all right.
Man, go ahead. You know, we had to go through some things. You know,
I know.
2020 wasn't nice to all of us.
Yes, yeah. Trust me, I know.
And we'll get into that a little bit, a little later, man, because definitely 2020 impacted everybody. You know, and we'll talk a little more about that. But big shout out to Sonya. Big shout out to Brady and the Brielle. the Smalls family. We love y'all, man. Y'all have always been there for us
Yeah.
from day
that,
one,
that
man.
feeling is mutual,
Yeah,
man. Feeling is
absolutely.
mutual.
Absolutely. So let's get into B Smalls, man. Listen, I read a lot in your bio. You have a very impressive bio. Did I leave out anything? You know, is there anything in here that I need to go back over? Let's talk about that first paragraph, man. And you know, once you left Lafayette High School and went on to college, and having that experience outside of Virginia, you know, and that's where, well, I imagine that is where you really learned yourself, you know, learn how to deal and operate without, you know, your support system, you know, being so far away from home. First of all, what made you choose Michigan? You know, and I know law was your thing, but
Sure.
you know, people may say, hey, you got William and Mary right down the street, you know,
It's
which
true.
has a prestigious prestigious school altogether, but law program and that type of thing. You know, what made you choose Michigan?
Well, there was a song back in the day, yeah, in regards to William Murray, something about back then they didn't want me.
Come on,
Now,
I'm hot. They all on me. Okay.
now they all on. No, I'm just messing. I'm just
Okay.
messing. So, so a lot of people, you know, who know me, you know, knew I grew up in Williamsburg, but I was actually born in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay.
So my mom is from Newport News. My father's from Georgetown, South Carolina, and so
Okay.
they met at Morgan State
Okay.
as college students. Got married after they finished, and then my father went to the dental school at the University of Michigan. So I was born his last year of dental school in 1981, and so from 1981 to 1983 we stayed in Ann Arbor. So for 2 years we lived there, but then at the age of 2 I moved to Williamsburg. So while I wasn't born in Williamsburg, I grew up in Williamsburg. But even though I grew up in Williamsburg, I was a Wolverine. Blue runs in in my veins.
Okay. Okay.
So that from the time I can remember, I was always a fan of Michigan and Michigan sports, particularly Michigan football. So,
Okay.
when I was in high school, I got the opportunity to send my highlight tape there, and was told that they had spots for walk-ons to come into their program. And so I sent a tape up there just on the off chance that they might, consider me.
Yeah.
I was already accepted into school there, and when I got that call to say, hey, we like what we see, and we want you to come, play football here. That was, I mean, for me, that was a dream come true. Most people,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to sports dreams, most people don't get to live their sports dreams.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I was one of a fortunate few to do that. And so yeah, I mean, I grew up, bleeding blue. So when I got that opportunity to go back to Ann Arbor
Yeah.
for school, I mean, that was a no-brainer for me. Now for my parents, it might have been something different since they was footing the bill. But
Right.
you know, but no, that was an opportunity of a lifetime. There was no way that I could turn that down.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, man. To have that experience, like you said, not a lot of people get that. Not a lot of people from this area, get that opportunity. And let's go a little further, man. On the football field, you had an opportunity to, like I mentioned before, to play with, who many people consider, most people, I like to assume, whether you like them a lot, the greatest of all time, Tom Brady. He just won another Super. I don't need to go through his resume. It's not about him, but you were right there with him, in college, a young Tom Brady. So we talk about leadership, he's one of the leaders. He's one of the leaders in professional sports. I'm sure he was one of the leaders, if not the leader, on that team that you all played on. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Like as far as leadership, you're a leader in your own right, and we'll get more into that. Like, what are some things that you may have learned from not only Tom Brady, but just your experience on the Michigan football field or football team? What are Coach Lloyd, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, Lloyd Carr. Yeah.
Yeah. Lloyd Carr. What are some things that you learned as far as how to carry yourself as a leader, or some leadership lessons that you learned on the football field?
Yeah. So when I got to Michigan in 1999, Tom Brady was a fifth year senior. And so, when it comes to pecking order, on a football team with 110, 115 players, um, you know, the freshman walk on, who's 5 foot, I'm gonna give myself, 5'10", but um, that I ain't nowhere close to that. Um, but
Right.
the 5'6", 5'7" walk on from Virginia,
Yeah.
is probably towards the bottom of the pecking order, as far as prestige on the team. But what was interesting about Tom Brady, if you know his story, when he got to Michigan, he was number 6 on the depth chart, you
Mhm.
know, and wasn't some ballyhooed recruit that everybody in the country wanted. He
Right.
came um, from Northern California, the San Francisco area, and certainly obviously was talented. Otherwise, he
Sure.
wouldn't have been at the University of Michigan.
Right.
But he didn't come there, you know. And nobody, nobody obviously expected him to, turn into the player that he has become.
Right.
But I don't think anybody, expects to be the greatest of all time when it comes to the quarterback position,
Yeah.
in particular. But he came to the University of Michigan, and by the time I got there, you know, here you see the Tom Brady that is so successful today, and 7-time Super Bowl champion,
Hmm.
model for a wife,
Yeah. Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Right.
just living the life. But
Right.
my senior year, here he is, a fifth year senior. He's still fighting for his job, because the year before, well, let me back that up. 2 years prior to me getting there, um, the University of Michigan won the national championship, led by Charles Woodson.
Okay.
Tom Brady was, a backup quarterback on that team,
Right.
and so that next year, after winning the national championship, they had the number one recruiting class in the country come in, and that class was led by a guy by the name of Drew Henson.
Okay.
So everything that Tom wasn't as a recruit coming into high school, Drew Henson was that and
Well,
then some.
yeah. Yeah.
Drew Henson was, back in the day when Parade All American was a big deal,
Right.
for football. He was, Parade, American, a Parade All American, quarterback of the year, top
Sure.
quarterback. But the
Right.
crazy thing about it was, I think Drew was like the third overall pick
Mhm.
in the baseball draft. He got drafted by the New York Yankees coming out of high school, out of Brighton High School.
Wow.
And so, from the time Drew came in, I think there was a lot of pressure on, the coaching staff to
Yeah.
get this guy,
Yeah.
in there to play. And don't get it twisted. Drew was ultra talented. I
Yeah.
mean, the things that I saw that guy do on a football field, I mean, just unbelievable,
Mm.
unbelievable. One of the most talented athletes I ever played with. But as a result of that, in the fact that he was, literally, a major, I'll just put it this way, a major signing bonus from the New York Yankees, and they
Yeah.
were grooming him to come in to play third base next to Derek Jeter. So,
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, just, it tells you the
Wow.
caliber
Yeah.
of athlete that this guy was.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a lot of pressure to get him on the field very early on. And so his sophomore year, Tom Brady's fifth year in the program, they battled the entire training camp. And,
Mm.
I had a front row seat,
Yeah.
to see, all of this take place. And, you know, Tom was a fighter. I mean, he would go out, if he had a great practice, he would come back even hungrier. And Drew was the same way. Drew was a fighter as well. Neither one of them wanted to concede anything.
Yeah.
And so, to start the season off, Tom, started the season off, starting, but they would flip flop. So basically, we had a two quarterback system, pretty much up through game 6. And we went on the road and played in East Lansing. At the time, we were ranked, I want to say, like number 3 in the country, and um, Michigan State was, top 10, and they had a guy who from our neck of the woods, Plaxico Burris.
Let's go Birds. Yeah.
And he was a beast. I mean, he gave us the business that
Yeah.
day. I mean, I'll never forget, he caught 10 passes for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, there was absolutely nothing
Yeah.
that we could do to stop that guy on that day. And so we got behind, and Drew had played a significant amount of time that game. And finally, in the second half, Coach Carr said, "Look, I'm going with my senior, with my veteran, Tom Brady." And Tom let us back in that ball game. He let us back, um, and we got close, but ultimately, I think we ended up losing that game by a field goal, if my memory serves me correctly. And but that really was my first kind of glimpse in, like, oh, this dude is different, from a mental standpoint, because he was despite all of the pressures, to play his teammate, he kept fighting, he kept fighting, he kept fighting. And eventually, the second half of the season, after that game, he won the starting quarterback job, and ended up going on and becoming the MVP of the Orange Bowl that year. We beat Alabama in that game, and we got down 2 scores in that game. And again, he just showed leadership. He brought us back on 2 different occasions, and that
Top
was a
notch
great
competition.
Alabama football team as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah.
so to see him go on from there, and everything, we don't even really have to talk about, his career at this point,
Sure.
because it kind of speaks for himself. But, he just showed a level of leadership, a level of fight that, despite everything that was going on around him, he was able to block out the naysayers. And, we didn't have social media like talking about back
Right. Right.
then,
Woo.
because it would have been crazy. But
Yeah.
despite all of the news reports and everything that, this was, Drew Henson's team to lose, he was like, no, this is my team.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the guys on the team
Yeah.
respected him for that. So he was a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
Now, from a coaching standpoint,
Yeah.
you mentioned head coach Lloyd Carr. Um, he was a master motivator. Coach Carr, every offseason, he would read a book or 3, and he would always take lessons from what he read, and he would always come back to the team that next fall, like, okay, here's what I read, in this particular book. And there was always lessons, and then he would always provide each member of the team with some, like, um, memento,
Mm.
that kind of represented whatever it was he had got from that book. And so he was just a master motivator. He also was one that, always tuned out the media, and just focused on his team and the task at hand. So, I guess from a leadership standpoint, that was one of the things that I noticed, was that, despite all the noise and everything going on around him, he was able to keep his team focused. And that's difficult when you're dealing with a group of, young men, boys in many respects. I know I was when I got there. Probably was one when I left, but he just had a way of being able to get the best out of his team. And so Coach Carr was one of those leaders that I always will look up to, and just because I know what he went through as a coach to really elevate his team to the level that he did. And that was back when Michigan would beat Ohio State. I know we haven't done it in a little while,
Right,
but
right.
he had the formula back then. So yeah, he was a phenomenal man, an awesome leader.
Yeah, yeah, and apparently, you mentioned him being a master and motivator. Apparently he motivated. I'm sure not only you, other young men to do things off of the football field. And I'm talking about you in particular because, you talked about, Brady and Henson being a fighter and having that grit and coach having that focus. So clearly you had a certain focus, you had a certain grit about you. You had that mentality of a fighter to get through your Michigan experience, on top of the game, pretty much. And reading your bio, receiving awards and really propelling your next chapter of your life at that time, going down to Florida. That's a
Sure.
big move in itself, but going down to Florida to focus even more on your projected career, in law. So talk a little bit about, your experience down in Miami, and I'm sure there was a major difference, if nothing,
Oh
the weather.
yeah.
Going from Michigan.
It's one of the reasons I was in Miami was
Right.
for the weather.
Right. So
One of the reasons I wish I was there right now too.
at this point, yes. Yes, indeed. So if you want to talk a little bit about, that experience and how that led you to, coming back home and serving back home as, as an attorney, and really getting into your not just your career, man, but you're stepping on your platform as a leader.
Yeah. So if I could just step back for a moment. So I played football my first 2 years when I was at Michigan.
Okay.
And my last 2 years, I worked in the athletic department, and I had the opportunity to play all 4 years, and
Okay.
um, I will tell you, I got frustrated. I think during my sophomore year, I kind of felt like as a walk on, um, you know, I had to work that much harder, to
Sure.
try to prove myself. And I remember coming out of spring practice my freshman year and seeing my name on the depth chart.
Mm.
I was on um, the punt block team,
Okay.
and I had kind of had developed kind of a knack for being able to get slim and
Yeah,
get
yeah.
through there
Get
and
skinny. Get
and, and
skinny.
block say get skinny, and block punts. And I can
Yeah.
remember, coming out of that train that spring practice sessions and thinking like, man, I've got an opportunity to step on the field. And I can remember getting back in the fall when practice started, and looking at the depth chart and where I was coming out of spring. My name was no longer on
Mm.
the list, and
Okay.
freshmen come in, and things just change. In the off season, and knowing what I know in hindsight, um, I should have allowed that experience to motivate me,
Okay.
but I didn't.
Okay.
After that season was over with, I was like, you know what? I'm going to, focus on school, and, figuring out kind of what the next step is for me in life. And it's one of my biggest regrets in life that I did not stick around for all 4 years. um like I said, I got to live my dream, and
Sure.
you think that most people, if they're living their dream, that they would want to stick with it. But I unfortunately I gave up on that
Yeah.
prematurely.
Yeah.
But again, that was a lesson that I took from it, and it's something that I think about, and I try to teach my kids: don't quit. Don't quit just because things aren't going your way. And again, you're young at that time, and I'm thinking like, man, I should be, at least getting the opportunity to compete.
Yeah.
And I just, it just was one of those situations where it didn't go my way. And so I said, all right, well, I'll just focus on school. That's what I'm here for anyways. But again, that's one of those lessons that I learned, that you can't just give up on things, because times get hard, times
Yeah.
get tough. So
Yeah.
but it was a lesson that I took with me to Miami. And my experience in South Florida, I love the weather.
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a it was
Yeah.
it was a great experience. But in between graduating from Michigan and starting school at the University of Miami, I got married. And so Sonia and I, dated the entire time. After my sophomore year on, we did the long distance thing, and
Okay.
I would come home and visit with her. And so going into our senior year, she had an extra semester she had to do because she was in a nursing program. And we I proposed to her
Nice.
going into our senior years. And so we decided to get married the summer after we both graduated, and we moved to Miami. So talk about a big change. She had never been away from home. I had, obviously been away from home. And so
Excuse me one second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but y'all are doing a wonderful job. Attorney Smalls, I love your work. Daryl, you're doing a good job, the podcast and everything. But I couldn't help but to really pay attention when you mentioned something about a wedding. You mentioned something about getting married. Yeah. So I'm gonna let you finish. But I just, anyone out there who's listening, if you plan on getting married, I have to tell you about Encore Music and Entertainment. They provide DJ services, the sound, the lighting for various events, anywhere from weddings to virtual parties. So as you're planning your event, make sure you're also planning them with Encore Music and Entertainment. In addition to that, I just want to let you know, because it sounds like y'all need some help up here. They also provide private music lessons, piano, violin, and viola, for those of y'all who are looking to tap into your inner musician and enhance the abilities that you have there. So I tell you what, just go to the website, encoremusicva.com, or you can contact them at 757-381-6981, or you can even email them at info@encoremusicva.com. All right, y'all go ahead on back to what you were talking about.
Here we are, newlyweds, don't know anybody. So that was a trying experience. She'll tell you that, I got on her nerves, and she sure got on mine. But
Right.
we had to learn as a couple. And that was one of those experiences I'll never forget. And I'm glad we got the opportunity to go through it, because we were away, and we had to really learn to depend on one another.
Sure.
And so we just developed a love for one another through that whole
Yeah.
situation. But um, from a leadership standpoint, being down there in South Florida, I got the opportunity to meet so many great professors. And we had a phenomenal dean when I was in law school down there. And you just kind of, you just saw the way that he led that institution, and it really trickled down to, in my opinion, to the students there. And so University of Miami was an up and coming law school at that time. And today it's one of the best law schools in the country, I think, as a direct result of the leadership
Yeah.
and just the vision. And so that's one of the big things is, as a leader, you got to have vision.
That's right.
Um, you know, you might not have it in the gate, right out the gate, but you see other people, and you see kind of how they just, they don't allow whatever their current circumstances are to dictate where they can go and where they can get to. And
Yeah.
sometimes that vision might seem so big that it just doesn't seem reasonable.
Yeah.
But man, you just keep plugging away, and you mess around, and one day, that dream or that vision that you had becomes a reality.
Yeah.
And so, so that, you know, my time there in South Florida was a great time. We also had some tough times. You know, my wife was pregnant 3 times, and I know you know the story. We lost 3 pregnancies, and
Yeah.
you know, I had to learn how to lead my family in, you know, through you know, trials and tribulations, and you know, hey, I'm a man, but I can tell you, I cried, you know, like a baby, you know, when we lost those pregnancies, and
Yeah.
you know, I think one of the things that happened for me, I really grew in my faith during that time frame. And so as a leader, you know, you have to, you know, you have to realize that, you know, you're not going to have all the answers, and you need to be able to, you know, rely on God, and keep the faith, and realize and understand that, you know, despite whatever is the situation might be, that as we used to sing in the church growing up, trouble don't last always.
I'm so
And so, yeah, exactly. May not come when you want them.
That's right.
um, but you know, I had to learn how to lead through a tough and difficult
Yeah.
situation, and they, yeah, I didn't have a playbook, or you know, a manual, you know, to do that. You know, you kind of learn on the go, and so some lessons that you learn as a leader are based on your experience. And it's always great. You know, I've had people tell me this. It's always great to learn from other people's experience. I had a mentor one time to say, if you're going to walk through a minefield with somebody who's already been through that minefield. You know,
Yeah.
because I can guarantee you, you know, if you're walking through a minefield and you walking with somebody who ain't never been through there before, both of y'all gonna end up dead.
Yeah.
But if you walking with somebody who's already been there, you know, then you can trust that they're going to, because obviously they don't want to die. So there, you just follow in their footsteps, and let them lead the way, and you know, until it's your time to lead somebody across that minefield. So, but yeah, so you know, I learned a lot in Miami. I learned, you know, how to persevere through dark times, and how to come out on the other side better for it, because you know, we lost those 3 pregnancies, and you know, we said, hey, let's take a break. Let's let your body heal up. And doggone, if you know, not but you know, probably 2-3 months later, we found out we were pregnant with you know, my son Brady, who's 13, you know, almost 14. So, so yeah, so sometimes you have to learn, just as a leader, you need to just kind of push through, and persevere, but be willing to be vulnerable, and talk to people when you're hurting. Because I think the thing that really helped me was, you know, talking to other people who had been through similar experiences. And what that led to me was, you know, I guess I didn't realize how many people were losing pregnancies, because man, it's just one of those things that's very common, but it's kind of faux pas. People don't like to talk about it. But you know, if I heard that a friend or somebody that I knew, you know, had lost a pregnancy, man, I would get on the phone. And you know, there was a point in my time I was real, you know, when somebody passes away, you just don't know what to say, and you know what, you know, and I think as a result of going through that process, I just learned that, you know, people just want to, you know, you know, if you've got an experience that you can share with them to uplift them and encourage them, then do it. Because I know it helped me, and so I would hope that my experiences would help, you know, other people. So, so yeah, so Miami was a great experience, but my wife made it very clear when we left to go to Miami, and she stood on the back of the U-Haul truck, crying with her dad, because she's a daddy's girl. She made it very clear that we were coming back to Virginia when I got done with law school. And she wasn't lying, because here I am back in Virginia. But I will say it certainly has worked out for us. So
yeah. And you said something that's key. Well, you said a lot of things, man, just kind of picking apart what you're saying and how it pertains to leadership, man. One thing as leaders, there's a level of empathy that we have to have, you know, in your situation that you just explained with losing the pregnancies, you know, as you said, it is something, and I didn't realize it either, you know, and really I think that's how, you know, the Smalls and the Crosbys kind of got closer, because we all have had our our experience.
Yeah.
You don't realize how many people go through it. And then when people do go through it, like you said, you don't really know what to say, unless you've been through it, And then now, because that experience in which you talked about before as well, that experience kicks in, and now what not to say, and that's probably more important than what to say.
Yeah.
And when somebody's going through something like that, so being an empathetic leader is critical, man, because you just know the people that you're leading, the people that you're serving, the people that's following you, you never know what they're going through,
Yeah. And oftentimes you hear people say, well, I know what you're going through. Well, guess what? A lot of times you don't know what folks are going through. You don't know the hurt. You don't know the pain.
Exactly.
And, but, I've come to the realization, and I'll be frank with people. I've had people, recently was talking to somebody who had recently lost a parent. And I was like, look, I've never been through that before, and so I don't know what that pain is like. I know that you have, losing your father. And so I can't pretend to know what it's like to lose a parent. I've lost a grandparent or grandparents, but it's not the same as losing a parent. And I know that, but despite the fact that I don't know what that pain is like, I know what it's like to be in pain. I know what it's like to hurt. And so you don't necessarily have to go through the same pain or have to have the same experience as someone else to be empathetic. I know you're hurting. And if it's just me just sitting here talking to you, encouraging you, letting you know that despite everything that's going on around you, God's got it under control. I think that, that's important. So you're absolutely right. Being empathetic as a leader, I think is so important.
Yeah. And actually, I want to kind of you brought up something, in my father, losing him in 2016. That was,
Wow, has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, October 2016, man. And my relationship with my dad, man, and that really hit me, man. But I also know, man, and I don't know if I ever said thank you for this, man. I know you and my father were in. I don't know how deep of conversation that you all were in, but you all were in some sort of conversation as it relates to Cornerstone, and so not necessarily getting into what you my father talked about, but
that's attorney-client privilege. I can't reveal that.
Right. But as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, let's talk a little bit about that, man. And as far as some of the things that you've learned, stepping into that role, because you go from Michigan, you go down to Miami, then eventually you get into that role. Maybe not right off the jump as a business owner or as an entrepreneur, whatever the case. But you had to grow, you had to learn, you had to develop. Then you made that step to go head out there on your own. And I remember a conversation when you decided to make that step, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, man. So and I know you've learned so much. So let's talk a little bit about that matriculation, as they say, that process of becoming that business owner, that entrepreneur, and how leadership and your style of leadership and your character as a leader, how that impacts your business. I know I just threw a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah. So we'll touch on that, but I think one thing that's important is that as a leader or as you're learning leadership, I talked about, what I learned, observing, people in my life and different bits and pieces that I kind of took from these folks. But I will tell you, just as importantly, is from folks who were supposed to be leaders
Come on now.
that really didn't have good leadership skills for whatever reason.
Right.
And while they some of them may have meant well, others not so much. But the reality is that as an aspiring leader, you have to be able to look at folks and realize, you know what, this isn't, if I get the opportunity to become a leader, this is not the way that, I think leadership should look. Leadership shouldn't be talking down to people. Leadership shouldn't be, putting people down because of, a mistake that somebody makes, or just thinking that you're better than the people around you. As a leader, it's important to know when to delegate.
Yeah.
But, sometimes as a leader, you got to be on the front lines on certain things.
Absolutely.
And, there's certain tasks, certain responsibilities as a leader that you can't delegate or that you shouldn't delegate. And so as much as I've learned from observing the positive aspects or the positive attributes of great leaders that I've seen up close and personal, I've also learned what not to do as a leader as well.
Yeah.
And so I think I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there, because I think that's, if you don't learn anything else, learn that, you can look at other people because I've been in work environments that, weren't the most positive. And I've had managers who weren't great managers.
Yeah.
But you can learn from that as well. Yeah. And so take from that, and allow that experience, even if it is negative, to be ultimately something that ends up being positive for you as a leader, and hopefully positive for, whoever else you're going to be leading. Yeah. So I think that that's important. So, but, I think that, my father, I think I mentioned, he went to dental school. He was a dentist here in Williamsburg from 1983 up until, I guess, this past summer, actually. Okay. So 30, plus years in this community as a business professional leader. Yeah. And so I saw my dad and his example. And that motivated me to, I knew eventually I would own my own business. Didn't quite know what that was going to be. That changed, a couple times over. But seeing him and my mom being his office manager, seeing the two of them work together, really left an impression on me. And right. It was what I knew I wanted. And so fast forward all these years later, here I am, with my own law practice, and, guess who's my vice president of operations?
Right.
My wife.
Right.
My mother-in-law works with me. So it is one of those things where, their example, obviously set the tone for me very early on in life. And it led to me being where I am today as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. Yeah. And it has been it has been a phenomenal experience. It's been a tough experience. Sure. Yeah. Not everything goes your way. Yeah. When you are an entrepreneur. Yeah. And a lot of it you're learning on the go, on the fly. You make mistakes and you swear you're not going to do it again, and you turn around and do it again, and yeah. But hopefully, eventually, when you go through things enough, you're willing to stop being stubborn, and realize and understand that there may be a better way of doing things, and being open to that. I tell you, one of my first experiences as a business owner, I had a good friend of mine. So when I left the Commonwealth Attorney's Office in Newport News in June of 2012, one of the first things I did, I knew that I was going into business for myself. And so I knew one of the first things I had to do as a business owner was I needed a website. So I, figured out WordPress, how to do that, and put together my website. Yeah. And I can remember the day that it launched, it got like maybe 300-400 hits. Yeah. And I was like, man, this is great.
Doing it, yeah.
I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm about to have all the clients in Hampton Roads.
Right.
And it went from 300 probably that first day to maybe 150 day 2, and by the end of the week, it was probably like 4 people. Because I didn't, at the time, I didn't realize that the website, wasn't supposed to be about me. It should have been about, the customers, the clients. So, again, another lesson learned as a leader. But I can remember a friend of mine reaching out to me. Actually, I had 2 friends reach out and say, "Hey, website looks good, but I do this for a living, and I've got some suggestions. Right. If you're ever willing to listen, or you want my assistance, help in putting together." He didn't come out and say it, but basically a better website.
Right.
Come holler at your boy. Yeah. And initially, my flesh rose up. I was like, is he talking about? Do you know how many hours I spent putting that website together?
50 hits first day.
Lost your mind.
Right.
I'm the website king.
Yeah.
And yet, on Google, I was probably page number 152. Right. Nobody was ever going to find me. But I will tell you that after initially the flesh, was set aside, I was like, I got somebody that's offering me like free advice, ain't asking me nothing, and literally will help me build a website that is going to do what I wanted to do, which is drive business to me. And to rank better, in search engine optimization, which I knew nothing about.
Yeah, a good old SEO.
And so, the reality was that here I was, in a situation where somebody was willing to take their time out to, really sow into my life, which, I don't think I realized it when he reached out that that's what he was doing. I don't even know if he realized that, that's what he was doing, but he did. He sowed into my life in a way that, I would have had to pay thousands of dollars for.
Yeah.
But he was a great friend, still is a great friend. Yeah. And, but the point of the matter is I had to set aside my ego. I had to put that thing down, and be humble enough to say, look, I don't know it all. So teach me, show me. And that willingness to be able to do that, ultimately led to the website, going from, page 152 to page 2. And then also showing up in the little map section, whenever anybody would do a search for the firm. So yeah, just being willing to listen and to take other people's advice when it's good advice. I think are important attributes, important traits that any leader should have.
Yeah, sure. And that's important because I have this thing that I have coined the Crosby principle of leadership. Right. Okay. So first one is listener. You got to be a good listener. Then you going to being enthusiastic about what you're doing, going to being approachable and accessible, being down to earth and being relatable to people, being educated. Got 4 levels there: the surface, the institutional, the applied, and the shared levels of education. And then there's that whole being respectful, because when you're respectful, you get that respect back. You're respectable. And so if you take the first letter in everything I just said, it spells the word leader. And so that listener piece, man, I think that's the key point, because I say it all the time. A lot of listeners just need, a lot of leaders just need to shut up sometimes, man, because as leaders, we feel that, because I had some knowledge about this,
Right.
we feel that we have to talk and be the one in the room talking all the time, man. But
Sure.
that's not the case.
No.
Leaders have, in your case, like you just mentioned, you put your ego down, you became teachable, and not only becoming teachable, but you were able to build that relationship with that person for him to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, B, or whatever you call you, Smalls, whatever, I got you. He felt comfortable enough to say, man, I see where you're going. We have that relationship. Let me help you take you to a next level. And if you had not heard that, if you had not listened to that, then you might have gone to page 175, but that, I think that is such a key point to being a leader, And I would have asked you if you had to go into a lab and construct a leader, build a leader, like what would be some attributes, some traits, and some things. But you've already in your talk, man, in our dialogue, you've already listed some things. So I'm going to list some of the things that I pulled out from what you said. If you got something else to add in there, man, let's build this leader.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Fighter, a master motivator, someone who's focused, someone with vision, someone who's teachable, someone who's empathetic. Those are just some of the things. I'm sure I missed some because I was really into what you're saying. So do you have anything else that you would like to add to make this ideal leader?
Sure. Yeah. Humble. I think there's something about being humble as a leader, realizing and understanding that, as a leader, first of all, you weren't always the leader. You at some point in time, you were a follower. You were following somebody else. And even as a leader, sometimes you need to be able to follow as well. But I think to be able to be humble, to realize that the sun doesn't rise and fall because of who you are as an individual. I think that it's very easy to get into leadership roles and positions and think that organizations that you run or teams that you're on or jobs that you're in, that these institutions cannot function without you.
Come on.
Okay. Well, newsflash, they function before you. They will function after you. And I think we just have to realize, understand that we are not the end all be all when it comes to, the different roles that we play. I'll talk really briefly about NAACP. So, when I was approached about taking on a leadership role with the NAACP, I really didn't know kind of what that looked like. But I will tell you that the branch that I was a part of, many of the folks were more seasoned, and they wanted to, get the branch younger, because they felt like from a longevity standpoint, to be able to be sustainable, through the years, you needed that youth within the organization. And so I will tell you, going in as a 30-some-year-old leading a group of folks that, in the meeting, the average age probably is 60, 65.
Wow.
You know, you know, you have to be willing to listen and realize that there's a lot of experience around you.
Yeah.
And so be willing to take the experience of other folks and learn from it and realize that, you know, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every time. If some things are working, then, you know, use those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. If some things can be improved, then, you know, let's do that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, having had the opportunity to serve as president of the York, James City, Williamsburg branch of the NAACP, first of all, it was a tremendous honor, and served 2 terms. And it seemed like I was always learning. So, you know, being willing to consistently learn, even when you think you know it all, because you really don't, I think is important. So, be willing to be humble. You know, learn from the experience that is around you, and you know, always be willing to learn. You know, regardless of what level you've reached and what you believe to be your leadership capacity.
I think that's wonderful information, especially for I don't know. I have a heart for young leaders, you know, aspiring leaders,
Sure.
leaders who are just stepping up on the platform, and I think, you know, there's something about leadership development, and I don't even think it has to be all on a formal platform where, you know, you go to classes and you get certificates and degree. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking those opportunities, man. But sometimes those practical, informal, impromptu lessons of leadership, man, I think they can go just as far. You know, so everything that you just mentioned, man, that can be something that people can, you know, exemplify in their walk as a leader. You know, young leaders are seeing someone who's humble and who's teachable. You know, you don't necessarily have to go through a textbook to get that.
Sure.
You know, and so what I want to do now, man, in the whole series of this podcast right now is about checking for understanding. You know, in education, we go through this thing where teachers teach, and in order for them to see how effective their instruction was, to see what what their students are learning, they give some sort of assessment, some sort of you know, exit ticket or whatever the case may be, to see what the students have learned. They're checking for their understanding. Now, 2020 tested everybody.
It did.
No one's exempt from that test, you know, from 2020. So as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as Brian Smalls, man, your attributes are amazing. Are you know, like the bio I read, man, it's impressive. You know, what did 2020 teach you? You know, we're dying to know, man. All millions of the Infinite Impact followers.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
They're dying to know what Brian Smalls, what did 2020 teach you, and what are you taking into 2021?
Yeah. So, you know, I think there were a lot of lessons to be learned from going through, you know, the pandemic. I think that when you really sit back and you really kind of take stock as to what we have gone through, or still going through.
Yeah.
Okay, as not only a country, but you know, right here in the Commonwealth, and then, you know, really everybody in the entire world has been impacted in some form or fashion. I think one of the biggest things that I took away from 2020 is you just have to realize that you're not always going to be in control. As a leader, you know, oftentimes we like to, you know, to have control. Oftentimes, we take leadership roles because we feel like if we can't do it, if it isn't done by us, it ain't going to be done right.
Right.
But I think one of the things that we learned from 2020 is guess what? We don't have, the ultimate say so in what goes on. And so realizing and understanding that, you may not be able to control every single situation. And so how do you respond? Do you get upset? Do you get angry? Are you able to go with the flow? People laugh at me when I say this. Okay. One of my favorite rappers of all time is Young MC. Okay. And people say, why in the world would, Young MC be one of your favorite rappers?
I have to say that I wasn't expecting Young MC, but, I'm open-minded, man. I want to hear this. Go ahead.
So, as a youngster, I think when I was first introduced to rap, I kind of came out the gate hard. I had a cousin that was living with me, and he was he was older. He was in high school. He was listening to Eazy-E, and I'm like, kind of came out the gate hot. Big Daddy Kane.
Okay.
But Young MC he was that. He was a young MC. He was a college age, a rapper who, his raps were really lighthearted or whatnot. And, he still has in my opinion, one of the best, hip hop, songs of all time, and Bust a Move.
You want it?
Exactly. I mean, he still gets royalties off of that because people still use that song, to this day. You hear it in movies and in commercials.
Yeah.
But he had a song, talk about, one-hit wonders. He, beyond that first album, I really don't think that, he had much success. But he had a song on that album that came out called Roll with the Punches. And, at the time I really couldn't understand, because first of all, I was really young and just didn't really, grasp the concept. But eventually, after listening to that song, years later, and just realizing that, look, sometimes life will hit you. And, in boxing, look, trust me, I'm not a boxer. I try not to get into fights, but one of the things that they say when you're boxing, if somebody's going to hit you with a jab, don't stick your face into it. If they're going to swing at you, roll with it, and it's going to take some of the sting, some of the impact off. And so we have to be willing to realize if whatever life gives us, things aren't going our way, we got to be willing to say, all right, acknowledge it, and then just roll with it. This didn't go the way I wanted it to, but it doesn't mean that I can't ultimately get to whatever the goal might have been. You just have to be willing to, again, be humble and realize that, you might end up in a situation where things aren't going your way. And for most of us, 2020 and starting in 2021, things, aren't going our ways, especially for the entrepreneurs and for the small business owners out there. I will tell you, very, very blessed through the pandemic. On March the 13th, when they, kind of shut everything down, I remember getting a phone call the following Monday or Tuesday. And no, I take that back. I got a phone call I think the day before, on the 12th, and it was a potential client who had reached out and wanted to come in and get their estate plan done in my law firm. And so, of course, I'm excited. We're going to meet the following Tuesday. And I get a call from this client saying, hey, I was watching the news and they're talking about this pandemic and how, serious it's getting, and people need to wear masks. And, we're going to hold off on, coming into your office until this thing is under control. Well, I still haven't heard back from that client or potential client. But it kind of, I kind of was like, hold up. I think it was like that next, over that weekend, I started listening to the news reports. Like, is my business really going to be impacted like this? And I could have taken a mindset of yes, that this was just not going to be good for all business owners, and so therefore, my business was going to suffer, or I was going to have to go out of business, and
Yeah.
you know, but I can tell you that our response was, and I say our, talking about myself, my wife, my family, was like, you know what? Despite everything that's going on around us, God is still faithful. He's still on the throne.
Yeah, that's right.
And we just have to, realize, understand that while this pandemic will impact us, how it impacts us is not necessarily going to be the same as it impacts somebody else.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that our business seemed to pick up despite the pandemic, and because we are in the from a law standpoint, we plan people's estates. We're a estate planning attorney.
Okay.
And so I think that as a result of people having, one, more time on their hands, and two, realizing that, look, anything can happen at any moment. Here we are in a pandemic. We need to get our affairs in order.
Yeah.
People start calling, and they haven't stopped. And it's been a blessing. It's just been it's just been an experience. But again, it was about how we chose to respond to it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were kind of already doing, we were doing Zoom calls before Zoom was Zoom.
Right.
you know. And so we were able to just kind of continue to operate, and where some, firms, I was hearing, stories about how, lawyers were frustrated because, they couldn't do it the way they typically did it.
Right.
And one of the things I think as a leader is you got to be able to adapt and adjust to your current circumstances. And so, things might not be going the way that you thought that they would, but now, okay, you are where you are. So how are you going to respond? How are you going to adapt to your situation or your scenario? So I think that's important. I think those are, I kind of rambled there for a moment, but I think that, those are the things I really took out of 2020 and the things that I'm taking into 2021.
That's awesome, man. That's that key, adapt and adjust. And I quite frequently I make this reference to a quote, one of his many quotes. My favorite guy, man, my favorite coach, Coach Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
He said, you got to have a solid plan, but stay light on your feet. And that, to me, that the imagery of that, man, it just made so much sense, and that reflects to what you just said, just being able to adapt and adjust. Now, going by the look on your face, I feel like you're about to say something in retaliation to my Pittsburgh Steelers.
No. I'm not going to disparage
not make those adjustments.
I'm not going to disparage your choice in professional football team. Mike Tomlin obviously is a local legend.
Yes, sir.
A hero.
Yeah.
Somebody that certainly I look up to. Obviously, you talk about from a leadership standpoint, he is, the quintessential leader of men.
Yeah.
Leading a football team.
Yeah.
But no, I as you were talking about that quote about being light on your feet, I was thinking about a quote from Bruce Lee about being like water. Water conforms. It takes on the shape of whatever container that it's in. And it'll fit through cracks and crevices, and it just it flows, but that's what water does. Water flows. Right. And so, what Bruce Lee was just really getting at. I was like, look, just don't be so like, not stagnant. Don't be so set in your ways, okay, that you can't adjust and adapt. And as a leader, you need to be able to adapt. And if you can't, I can almost guarantee your leadership skills are going to suffer. And whatever organization, whatever team, whatever business that it is that you're leading, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah. And I always like to say, man, it's to the point where poor leadership, man, can cause lives.
Yes.
You know,
it can.
Well, we can, a better way to say it, we can lose lives with poor leadership.
Yeah.
Lose lives, or you can save lives.
Yeah.
And it's to that point, you know.
Yeah.
It's key. It's key to success, man. And we have to realize as leaders, you know, we're impacting. That's why I love, you know, just the title, Infinite Impact, man, because we're impacting generations.
Yeah.
Your Brian Small's legacy as a leader is going to impact so many people, especially in estate planning. You know, people looking to you to be able to make the right decisions when they might not be in the right mind frame too.
Yeah.
You know, that's impacting generations, man.
Yeah.
So listen, man, I definitely appreciate our conversation. As you know, we always do, even without the microphone right here. You know, we can talk for hours just about life, man. And I've learned a whole lot from you in our time, even though I didn't like you.
Like I said, the feeling was very, very mutual. Like if I see him in the streets,
on site,
it's on site.
No, but look, tell the people where they can find you, man. As far as social media and websites and that type of thing.
Yeah, so you know, I can be found on, you know, most social media platforms. Cornerstone Estate Planners. There's an E at the end of Cornerstone, and there's an E at the beginning of estate. Sometimes people will mess you two, so it's just one. No, it's two E's up in that jank.
Right.
Or as my Philadelphia people say, in that John.
Yes, sir, that John.
But yeah, so social media, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on TikTok now.
Okay.
You know, you better recognize.
Okay. So, Attorney Brian Smalls, once again, man, we say thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to get the opportunity to connect with you, Daryl. I appreciate the work that you're doing in this space. It's needed and it's necessary. You know, I got mad love for you, despite the fact that you interrupted my phone calls.
Go ahead, man. Look, it ended up being a good thing, man. Y'all are what, 17 years in?
17 into the game.
Yeah, we're right behind you at 16. So,
yeah.
It was all for good reasons, man.
Yeah. Maybe my phone calls is what led to y'all being a year behind us, but
I didn't think about that, but yeah.
I'll take credit for that. But look, y'all in the game. Y'all veterans at this point.
Veterans, baby, veterans.
Listen, I truly appreciate you all taking the time to chime in to the Infinite Impact Leadership Podcast. Be on the lookout for the leadership series called Checking for Understanding, where I'm going to sit down with some awesome leaders to get their perspectives about what they've learned in 2020 and how it will impact their 2021. So you do not want to miss out on that. You can find more work and posts and interactions on the Facebook page, Dr. Daryl Crosby. So go ahead and like the page, as well as become a part of the Infinite Impact Leadership Group on Facebook, and chime in with some of the discussions and ideas that are shared with some wonderful current and aspiring leaders. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Daryl Cross. That's DARYLCROS. So follow me there too, and I'll follow back. Go ahead over to Apple Podcasts, leave that 5-star review and that comment, and I will be sure to shout you out on a future episode. There's so many ways to connect with me and everything that I'm doing. Your support is greatly appreciated. Meanwhile, remember that leadership is a platform, not a pedestal. We've seen firsthand what poor leadership looks like and what it produces. Don't be that one, because there are generations that are dependent on your leadership.